Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our second Morning Mind session of Brain Awareness Week 2021. My name is Miss Denise, and here again with me today is Miss Brittany. Now, yesterday we talked about our brain and how it allows us to do things like walk, talk, remember, make decisions, plan for the future, and much more. And we talked about how the brain is able to achieve this because it's organized into different sections called lobes. And even though lobes have certain responsibilities, they're always communicating with each other to allow our brain to operate. Now today, we are going to be learning about neurons. And neurons are the cells that make up our brain and enable us to do all of the cool things that we just mentioned.
Before we dive into discussion about neurons, let's talk about cells more generally. You can think of cells as Legos. They are the building block of the body. We have trillions and trillions of cells that help our body move and function. You can think of them as little machines. Brain cells, which we call neurons, are not the only type of cell in the body. We have a bunch of other cells, such as cells in our bloodstream that carry oxygen, or cells in our arms and our legs that help us move our muscles.
So just like a lot of Legos of all different shapes and sizes would make up a house, a lot of neurons make up the brain. But how much is a lot? We actually have 100 billion neurons in our brain, and they consume about 20% of the body's total energy, even though our brain only makes up about 2% of the body's mass.
So what do neurons do? Neurons send messages throughout the brain and throughout the body. You can think of them as a mailman that's transporting packages throughout the globe. And like we talked about yesterday, these messages enable us to hear, see, feel emotions, move, and the list goes on and on. Let's take a closer look at a neuron. As you can see in the cartoon illustration here, neurons have kind of a funny shape. And this is because each neuron has a very specific job to do.
At one end of the neuron, we have the dendrites. And the job of the dendrites is to reach out and catch neural messages that are being sent their way. So on one neuron, we have multiple dendrites, and again, their job is to be that receiver, to catch any messages being sent their way.
Next up, we have the cell body. You can think of the cell body as the command center for the cell. It contains the DNA, which can be thought of as a list of instructions that allows the cell to operate. One of its jobs of the cell body is to decide if a message is worth sending throughout the rest of the neuron.
So if the cell body decides that message is worth it, it gets sent down a very long structure called the axon. And you can think of the axon like a long highway. Its job is to transport a message from one end of the neuron to the other. And we have axons of all different lengths in our body, the longest being about 1 meter long, which starts at the base of our spinal cord and runs all the way out to our toes.
After making this long journey down the axon, we have the axon terminal. This is where messages are released from one neuron so they can travel to the next neuron. You can think of the axon terminal like a bus terminal, where buses leave a terminal to go to its next destination.
And finally, we have the myelin. The myelin wraps around the axon and acts like an insulator. Its job is to make sure that the neural message cannot escape while it's in transit. So you can think of it like the guardrails of a highway. Or let's say we had a pipe and that pipe had a crack in it, which was allowing water to leak out. Now you might wrap the pipe in duct tape so water can escape, and in this instance, the myelin would be similar to the duct tape, making sure that a neural signal isn't lost when it's in transit from our cell body down to the other end of the neuron.
Now, let's zoom back out. Let's say we want to move our foot. This message originates in the brain and then is sent throughout a long chain of neurons to get the message to our foot. The message is picked up by the dendrites of one cell, then passes through the axon until it reaches the axon terminal, where it is released to the next neuron. And the dendrites of that neuron can pick up the message and repeat this cycle on and on until it gets to its final destination. Just like a game of telephone, by whispering in each other's ears, we are passing along a message on a chain until it reaches a new destination.
So now that we've learned a bunch about the cells in our brain and their unique functions, let's apply this in an activity. We want you to grab your experiment bags and take out the pipe cleaners that are all different colors. And we're going to be making our very own neuron. So let's begin. Alright, so we just learned about the cells in our brain called neurons, which are the building blocks of our brain. And now we're going to build our very own neuron out of pipe cleaners so we can see what each of the parts do.
First, we can start with the cell body, which, as we talked about in the lesson, can be thought about as the boss of the cell, because it makes the decision if the message should be carried out throughout the rest of the neuron. So you can take your long blue pipe cleaner and wrap it in a circle. Perfect.
Awesome. Got our cell body. Next, we are going to make the dendrites. And the dendrites are attached to our cell body, and their job is to receive messages from neighboring neurons. They're kind of like the hands that are grabbing the letters from the mailman. So, take our 3 green pipe cleaners here and attach them to the cell body. Now, they can be squiggly or straight. It is totally up to you.
Awesome.
Looking good.
Okay, now we're going to make the axon, which, like we talked about in the lesson, is this long highway that the message has to travel down after it's received by the dendrites. So to do so, you can take this long red pipe cleaner and attach it directly to the cell body. Okay, but we're not done yet with this axon, because remember, there's this myelin that covers the axon to help insulate it and help the message travel lightning fast throughout the brain. So after you have your axon, what you can do is take the 3 white pipe cleaners that you have and wrap them around this axon, just like this, to act as the myelin. Again, without this myelin, messages will travel really slow throughout your brain, and you don't want that because you want to sometimes act very quickly.
Exactly. Imagine if you went to catch a ball and your hand moved this slowly. That would probably be a problem. All right, so we have one piece left. Our short red pipe cleaner here is going to be the Axon Terminal. So we want to just attach this to the end of our axon. We can make a V shape. And again, the job of the Axon Terminal is to release the message so that it can be sent to the next neuron. So here you have it. We have our very own neuron, our building block of the brain. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we will see you back tomorrow for a lesson on our sense of taste and our sense of smell.